Jake Morrison stood at the window of his office on Centauri Prime and watched the alien ships move through the busy sky above the galactic capital. After 15 years as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, he had grown tired of being treated like a child among adults. The other species barely listened when humans spoke during council meetings. They nodded politely and then ignored every suggestion Earth offered. The sealed orders from Earth Command sat on his desk. Jake had read them 3 times already, but the words still seemed impossible. Complete withdrawal from galactic society. Every human colony, every research station, every diplomatic post would be abandoned within the next month. Operation Silent Dawn would remove humanity from the galaxy so quietly that most aliens would not notice until it was too late. Jake picked up his communication device and sent the coded message to all human outposts across 17 worlds. The FY's message was simple and had been planned for months. Pack everything personal. Leave everything else behind. Report to evacuation points within 72 hours. No explanations to alien colleagues. No goodbyes. Just disappear like morning mist. Captain. Lisa Hayes received the message while inspecting the human colony on Kepler 7. She had been expecting this order for weeks. The colony housed nearly 300,000 humans who had built farms and factories on the green world. To the Galactic Council, it was just another agricultural settlement that provided food for the local sector. They had no idea that the farms were cover for advanced research laboratories hidden underground. Lisa called her senior staff together in the main administrative building. The colony managers, security chiefs, and research directors filled the room. She looked at each face carefully before speaking. The order had come from Earth Command. Every human settlement would evacuate immediately. The aliens could keep the buildings and equipment, but they would lose something far more valuable than they could imagine. The evacuation fleet had been positioned at the edge of each human system for months. Transport ships that the aliens thought were supply vessels were actually designed to move entire populations quickly and quietly. The Galactic Council's own shipping records showed these ships as routine cargo haulers. No one had looked closely, enough to notice they could hold thousands of passengers. Dr. Kevin Brooks was working late in his laboratory at the Council Research Station when the evacuation order arrived. For 8 years, he had shared his research with alien scientists, who took credit for his discoveries. His work on quantum physics and energy systems had advanced galactic technology by decades, but the official reports always listed alien researchers as the primary investigators. Kevin looked around his laboratory one last time. The equipment was worth millions of credits, but the real value was in his mind and in the encrypted data he carried. The aliens would find empty computers and useless machinery. The important research was already loaded onto the human transport ships. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 days after the last human transport left the inner systems. Council Speaker Zixthala of the Ethereal Collective had called the meeting after reports came in from across the galaxy. Human colonies were empty. Research stations had been abandoned. Diplomatic offices stood vacant. The great council chamber on Centauri Prime filled with representatives from 47 different species. The Krillian Empire's military leaders sat in their traditional seats of power. The Vex Consortium's merchant princes counted losses on their data tablets. The ancient Ethereal Collective's floating forms hovered near the speaker's platform. Zixthala's translated voice echoed through the chamber. The situation was unprecedented in galactic history. An entire species had simply vanished from civilized space. There had been no demands, no threats, no negotiations. The humans had packed up and left like tenants moving to a new apartment. Commander Krell of the Krillian Empire stood to address the council. His species had ruled the galaxy's military affairs for 3,000 years. In his opinion, the human departure was good news. Humans had always been too soft for real leadership. Their strange ideas about cooperation and peaceful solutions had weakened the galaxy's defenses. The Krillians were ready to take over human responsibilities immediately. Merchant Prince Vexcalar disagreed strongly. The Vex Consortium had built profitable relationships with human colonies across 17 systems. Human agricultural output fed 3 entire sectors. Their manufacturing facilities produced components for hundreds of different alien technologies. The economic impact of their disappearance could destroy established trade networks. The debate continued for hours. Some council members saw opportunity in humanity's departure. Others worried about the consequences. None of them understood the real situation. For decades, humans had quietly woven themselves into the foundation of galactic civilization. They had solved problems that other species did not even know existed. Admiral Greg Palmer watched the council proceedings from his flagship at the edge of known space. The human fleet had gathered in a star system that did not appear on any galactic charts. Long-range sensors monitored communications from the inner worlds. The aliens were starting to panic, but they had no idea how deep their problems really went. The human departure had been planned for 5 years. Earth's leadership had grown tired of being treated as junior partners while providing solutions to galactic problems. Human engineers maintained trade routes. Human scientists advanced alien technology. Human diplomats prevented wars between hostile species. All of this work was done quietly and without recognition. Now the galaxy would learn what it meant to manage without human help. The aliens had always believed they were superior to humanity. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. The Galactic Council would fall apart without human problem-solving abilities holding it together. Jake Morrison sealed his final report as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. The document contained a simple message that would be delivered after the last human ship left galactic space. Humanity thanked the Council for the opportunity to serve, but circumstances required their departure. No forwarding address would be provided. The Great Exodus was almost complete. 2 million humans were leaving 17 worlds to start fresh somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies. They took their knowledge, their technology, and their solutions with them. The aliens could keep the empty buildings and useless equipment. The Galactic Council would soon learn that losing humanity was not about losing workers or soldiers. It was about losing the species that had quietly held their civilization together. The council chamber fell silent as the last human transport disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy that was about to collapse without ever understanding why. 6 months had passed since humanity vanished from galactic space, and Admiral Greg Palmer could see the cracks spreading through alien civilization like breaks in thin ice. His flagship moved silently through the dark between star systems, far beyond the reach of galactic sensors. The human fleet had found a perfect hiding place in an ancient nebula that scrambled most detection equipment. The first signs of trouble appeared on the major trade routes that connected the inner worlds. Pirate attacks increased by 300% in areas where human patrol ships had once provided quiet security. The aliens had never realized that Earth's merchant vessels carried military-grade weapons and coordinated with galactic defense forces to prevent raids on commercial shipping. Captain Nicole Davis commanded one of the human stealth ships that monitored alien communications. Her vessel looked like empty space to most sensors, allowing her crew to observe the chaos spreading through the Galactic Council's territory. The aliens were discovering that many of their everyday systems depended on human maintenance and oversight. The early warning network that protected the inner worlds from asteroid impacts had begun failing. Alien engineers could not understand why the sophisticated sensor arrays stopped working properly. They did not know that human technicians had secretly upgraded the detection systems over many years, adding improvements that were invisible to casual inspection. Dr. Kethvar of the Krillian Empire stood before his military commanders and delivered a disturbing intelligence report. The abandoned human colonies contained technology that surpassed anything in the Krillian database. What the Council had dismissed as primitive agricultural settlements were actually advanced research facilities disguised as simple farms. The underground laboratories on Kepler-7 held quantum computers that operated at efficiency levels the Krillians could not duplicate. The power systems used energy sources that alien science barely understood. Most disturbing of all, the research data had been completely wiped before the humans left. Only empty shells remained of technologies that could have advanced Krillian military capabilities by centuries. On Centauri Prime, The Galactic Council struggled with problems that had never existed before humanity's departure. Communication networks that had operated flawlessly for decades began experiencing random failures. The elegant software systems that managed everything from traffic control to waste disposal required constant attention that no alien technician could provide. The VEX Consortium faced the worst economic crisis in their 3,000-year history. Trade routes that humans had maintained through careful diplomacy and strategic partnerships collapsed into territorial disputes between rival species. The merchant princes watched their profits disappear as shipping costs tripled and delivery schedules became completely unreliable. Merchant Prince Vexcalar called an emergency meeting of the consortium's board. The financial reports painted a picture of impending disaster. Human colonies had provided food for over 2 billion beings across multiple systems. Their manufacturing facilities had produced critical components for everything from medical equipment to starship engines. The disappearance of these resources created shortages that threatened the stability of galactic commerce. Captain Steve Johnson monitored alien military communications from his hidden listening post near the galactic core. The information he gathered painted a clear picture of growing panic among the Council's leadership. Military commanders were reporting equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and coordination problems that had not existed when humans participated in galactic defense. The ethereal collective's ancient archives held records going back 50,000 years. But Elder Kennethus had never seen anything like the current crisis. The departure of one species should not have caused such widespread disruption. The fact that it had suggested something disturbing about the true nature of humanity's role in galactic civilization. Kennethus floated through the vast library chambers, searching for historical precedents. The archives contained records of species that had vanished from galactic society, but none of those departures had caused systemic collapse. Most extinct civilizations had been conquered or had destroyed themselves through war. Humanity had simply chosen to leave, and their absence was revealing dependencies that no one had recognized. Dr. Amy Taylor reviewed her old reports from her office aboard the colony ship New Horizon. As former head of the Human Cultural Exchange Program, she had spent years documenting how human problem-solving methods differed from alien approaches. Her warnings about overdependence on human solutions had been dismissed by council bureaucrats who saw humans as useful but ultimately replaceable. The reports showed a clear pattern. Whenever galactic civilization faced a complex problem, human representatives would quietly develop solutions that worked better than traditional alien methods. These improvements were implemented gradually and without fanfare. Over time, the aliens had grown dependent on human innovations while forgetting that humans were responsible for creating them. The breakdown was accelerating faster than anyone had predicted. Systems that had operated automatically for decades suddenly required manual oversight. Diplomatic agreements that had maintained peace between hostile species began falling apart without human mediators to smooth over cultural misunderstandings. Council. Security Chief Veltar received reports of 17 different crisis situations that had emerged simultaneously across the galaxy. Territorial disputes between the Sarian Federation and the Volix Empire threatened to escalate into open warfare. The Crystalline Confederacy had closed its borders after accusing the hegemony of sabotaging trade agreements. 3 different species were demanding reparations for economic losses caused by the collapse of human-maintained supply chains. The security reports revealed another disturbing pattern. Criminal organizations that had been effectively suppressed for years were suddenly operating openly in regions where human intelligence networks had provided surveillance and coordination. The aliens had never realized that Earth's diplomatic missions included sophisticated spy networks that tracked terrorist activities and organized crime across multiple systems. Admiral Palmer studied the intelligence data flowing in from Nicole's stealth ships and Steve's listening posts. The galactic government was collapsing faster than even the most optimistic human projections had predicted. The aliens had built their civilization on a foundation of human competence without ever acknowledging that the foundation existed. The Krillian Empire's military leaders were discovering that their famous tactical coordination depended on communication, protocols that human technicians had quietly improved over many years. Without those improvements, Krillian fleets were experiencing command and control problems that made large-scale operations nearly impossible. The ethereal collective's ancient wisdom seemed useless when applied to practical problems that required immediate solutions. Their philosophical approach to governance worked well for long-term planning, but failed completely when dealing with urgent crises that demanded quick decisions and creative problem-solving. The Vex Consortium's merchant networks were unraveling, as species after species withdrew from trade agreements that had become unprofitable without human agricultural output and manufacturing capacity. The carefully balanced economic relationships that had maintained galactic prosperity for centuries were collapsing into protectionism and resource hoarding. On the human ships scattered through dark space, families that had spent generations building lives on alien worlds watched their former homes descend into chaos. The children born on galactic colonies learned about their heritage while traveling toward an uncertain future among stars that held no familiar names. The Exodus had succeeded beyond Earth Command's expectations. Humanity had extracted itself from galactic civilization so cleanly that the aliens still did not understand what they had lost. The Galactic Council continued to debate responses to the human departure, while their society crumbled around them. Admiral Palmer authorized the preparation of the next phase of Operation Silent Dawn. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity's quiet competence had been the only thing preventing their advanced civilization from collapsing into primitive chaos. The lesson would be expensive, but some truths could only be learned through painful experience. The galactic economy entered complete freefall as the first anniversary of humanity's departure approached. Commander Steve Johnson watched from his hidden monitoring station as panic spread through the council chambers on Centauri Prime. The alien leaders finally understood that they were facing the collapse of their civilization, but they still did not comprehend the true scope of their dependence on human intelligence and innovation. The revelation came in pieces like a puzzle that revealed a terrifying picture. Systems that had operated smoothly for decades required constant emergency repairs. The elegant solutions that had made galactic civilization possible were breaking down one by one, and no alien engineer could figure out how to fix them. Dr. Amy Taylor sat in her quarters aboard the New Horizon and reviewed the intercepted communications that painted a picture of accelerating disaster. Her former colleagues in the Cultural Exchange Program had tried to warn the Council about over-reliance on human problem-solving abilities. Those warnings had been filed away and forgotten by bureaucrats who believed that any species could replace humanity's contributions. The trade networks that connected 47 different worlds had been designed by human logisticians who understood how to balance competing interests and cultural differences. Without their subtle management, the networks collapsed into territorial disputes and economic warfare. Species that had traded peacefully for centuries were now threatening each other over shipping routes and resource allocation. Elder Cunethus of the Ethereal Collective made a discovery that filled him with dread. The ancient archives contained records of previous encounters with humanity's ancestors thousands of years ago. The pattern was identical. A seemingly primitive species had appeared at the edges of galactic space, offering helpful solutions to complex problems. The galactic powers of that era had accepted human assistance while treating humans as inferior beings. The historical records showed that humanity had eventually withdrawn from that ancient civilization as well. Within 50 years, the galactic empire of that era had collapsed completely. Entire species had vanished from the historical record. Cunethus realized that the current Galactic Council was repeating the same fatal mistake that had destroyed their predecessors. Captain Nicole Davis piloted her stealth ship through the outer systems and recorded the spreading chaos. Pirates and terrorists who had been suppressed by human intelligence networks were now operating openly across multiple sectors. The sophisticated surveillance systems that had tracked criminal activities were failing without human technicians to maintain their complex sensor arrays and data analysis protocols. The Sarian Federation and the Volix Empire had begun mobilizing their fleets for what appeared to be an inevitable war. The territorial agreements that had maintained peace between these species for 2 centuries were collapsing without human diplomats to mediate their cultural misunderstandings. Both sides blamed the other for violations that were actually caused by the breakdown of monitoring systems that humans had quietly maintained. Admiral Greg Palmer reviewed the intelligence reports flowing in from across human-occupied space. The situation was developing exactly as Earth Command had predicted. The aliens had built their advanced civilization on a foundation of human competence, but they had never acknowledged that foundation existed. Now they were learning the cost of their arrogance. The Krillian Empire's military commanders were discovering that their tactical superiority had depended on communication and coordination systems that human engineers had secretly improved over many years. Without those improvements, Krillian fleets could barely coordinate simple patrol missions, let alone the complex strategic operations that had maintained their dominance for 3 millennia. Dr. Kevin Brooks analyzed the technical data that human monitoring stations collected from abandoned galactic facilities. The aliens were trying desperately to reverse engineer human improvements to their technology, but they lacked the theoretical knowledge necessary to understand how the improvements worked. They could copy the hardware, but they could not replicate the innovative thinking that had made the hardware effective. The Galactic Council's emergency sessions had become daily events, as crisis after crisis demanded immediate attention. Council Security Chief Veltar reported that 17 different conflicts had erupted simultaneously across the galaxy. The careful balance of power that humanity had maintained through subtle diplomacy was collapsing into open warfare between member species. The Vex Consortium's merchant princes faced bankruptcy as their carefully constructed trade networks disintegrated. The economic relationships that had generated enormous profits for centuries were failing without human agricultural output and manufacturing capacity. Worse, the aliens were discovering that they did not know how to recreate the production methods that humans had developed. Merchant Prince Vexcalar stood before the consortium board and delivered the worst financial report in their history. The human colonies had not just provided raw materials and simple products. They had developed revolutionary manufacturing techniques that increased efficiency by orders of magnitude. The apparent simplicity of human operations had hidden sophisticated innovations that alien engineers could not duplicate. The breakdown extended far beyond economics and military affairs. The cultural exchange programs that had prevented conflicts between different species were collapsing without human coordinators who understood how to bridge the gaps between radically different ways of thinking. Species that had coexisted peacefully for generations were rediscovering ancient prejudices and territorial instincts. Commander Krell of the Krillian Empire reviewed intelligence reports that painted an increasingly desperate picture. The humans had not just been participants in galactic civilization. They had been its architects, engineers, and maintenance crew. Every major system that kept the galaxy functioning had been quietly improved by human innovation over the decades. The most disturbing discovery was that humans had apparently anticipated their own departure. The facilities they abandoned contained no useful information about how their improvements worked. The computer systems had been wiped clean. The manufacturing equipment had been modified to prevent reverse engineering. Even the agricultural installations had been stripped of the genetic modifications that had made them so productive. Elder Quinethus shared his historical discoveries with the Ethereal Collective's ruling council. The archives revealed that humanity had followed this same pattern before. They would integrate themselves into galactic civilization, quietly solving problems and improving systems while being treated as inferior beings. When their patience finally ended, they would withdraw completely, leaving their host civilization to collapse. The pattern suggested something terrifying about human nature. They were not conquerors who destroyed their enemies through force. They were gardeners who cultivated civilizations until those civilizations proved themselves unworthy of human care. The withdrawal was not an act of spite, but a natural consequence of being undervalued and disrespected. Dr. Amy Taylor prepared a comprehensive report analyzing the scope of galactic dependence on human capabilities. The data showed that humans had been responsible for maintaining over 60% of the critical systems that kept galactic civilization functioning. They had done this work so quietly and efficiently that the aliens had forgotten it was being done. The report detailed how human innovations had improved everything from medical treatment to waste disposal. Human agricultural techniques had increased food production by 300%. Human manufacturing methods had reduced production costs while improving quality. Human diplomatic practices had prevented dozens of wars through careful negotiation and cultural understanding. Captain Steve Johnson intercepted communications from the Galactic Council that revealed the true extent of alien desperation. The Council was authorizing emergency measures that violated their own laws and treaties. Species that had been enemies for millennia were being forced to cooperate in desperate attempts to prevent total civilizational collapse. The aliens were finally beginning to understand that humanity had not been seeking their approval or recognition. Humans had been managing galactic civilization like responsible adults caring for ungrateful children. The departure was not an abandonment, but a graduation exercise that the aliens were failing catastrophically. Admiral Palmer authorized the next phase of the operation. It was time to let the galaxy know that humanity was still watching from the darkness between stars. The aliens would soon learn that their greatest fear was not that humanity had left forever, but that humanity might choose to return on completely different terms. The Galactic Council authorized unprecedented measures to contact humanity and negotiate their return. For the first time in galactic history, the mighty council was begging for help from a species they had dismissed as primitive servants. The irony was not lost on any of the human observers who monitored alien communications from their hidden fleet. Captain Danny Rogers received the first official communication from the council in over a year. The message arrived at the human fleet's temporary base through an automated probe that had somehow tracked them across impossible distances to a star system that did not appear on any galactic charts. The fact that the aliens had found them at all was impressive, but the content of the message was even more remarkable. The Council's formal apology filled several pages of diplomatic text, but the essential message was simple. The galactic government acknowledged that they had underestimated humanity's contributions to their civilization. They were inviting humans to return with full membership rights, equal voting power, and complete autonomy over their own territories. Everything that humanity had been denied for decades was now being offered freely. Ambassador Jake Morrison reviewed the Council's offers with his diplomatic staff aboard the flagship. The aliens were desperate enough to promise almost anything. If humanity would return and repair the damage caused by their departure, the power dynamic had shifted completely. The species that had once treated humans as useful servants were now begging for human leadership. Dr. Helen Chang analyzed the intercepted communications that revealed the true scope of galactic collapse. Her former position as humanity's representative to the Council Science Directorate gave her unique insight into how thoroughly alien civilization was failing. 3 major trade routes had been permanently severed by conflicts that human diplomats could have prevented with simple mediation. The Saurian Federation and the Volix Empire were mobilizing for a war that would devastate both civilizations. 2 smaller species were facing extinction as their agricultural systems collapsed without human-developed farming techniques. The Crystalline Confederacy had sealed its borders and declared that any alien ship entering their territory would be destroyed without warning. The technical failures were accelerating beyond the aliens' ability to manage them. The quantum communication networks that allowed instantaneous contact between distant worlds were breaking down as the human-designed relay stations failed one by one. The sophisticated computer systems that managed everything from traffic control to life support were reverting to primitive backup protocols that could barely maintain basic functions. The Krillian Empire made the first direct military threat when their intelligence services finally located the general region where humanity's fleet was hiding. Commander Krell dispatched a battle group of 12 heavy cruisers to search the dark nebula where human ships had taken refuge. The Krillians believed their military superiority would force humanity to surrender and return to their former role as galactic servants. Admiral Greg Palmer monitored the approaching Krillian fleet and authorized the deployment of humanity's actual military capabilities for the first time since their departure from galactic space. The aliens were about to discover that human defensive technologies had advanced far beyond anything in their databases. The human ships that emerged from the nebula looked nothing like the simple vessels that had served in the galactic fleet. These were the products of centuries of secret research and development that had been hidden from alien observation. They moved through space using physics that violated every known law of galactic science. The Krillian battle group found themselves surrounded by vessels that could phase in and out of normal space at will. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking with weapons that bypassed traditional shielding systems completely. The entire engagement lasted less than 10 minutes before the surviving Krillian vessels retreated in complete panic. Captain Nicole Davis recorded the alien communications during the brief battle. The Krillian fleet commanders were reporting impossible things. Human ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy weapons that struck targets before they were fired. Defensive systems that turned incoming missiles into harmless light shows. The reports from the retreating Krillians sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. The species they had dismissed as technologically inferior possessed weapons and defenses that made the galaxy's most advanced military forces look like children playing with toys. The implications were terrifying for alien leaders who had spent centuries believing in their own superiority. Commander Steve Johnson monitored the emergency council sessions that followed the failed Krillian attack. The alien leaders were finally beginning to understand that humanity had never been dependent on galactic civilization for protection or technology. Humans had been protecting the galaxy while developing capabilities that surpassed alien science by generations. The revelation changed everything about how the aliens viewed their former human colleagues. Every human diplomat, scientist, and technician who had worked quietly within galactic institutions had been far more advanced than their alien counterparts. The humans had been teaching while pretending to learn, leading while pretending to follow. Dr. Kevin Brooks prepared detailed technical analyses of human capabilities based on the recent military demonstration. His reports would be transmitted to the Council as part of humanity's response to their desperate overtures. The aliens needed to understand exactly how far they had fallen behind during the centuries when they had been dismissing human innovations. The data showed that human science had advanced beyond the theoretical limits of what aliens believed was possible. Human manufacturing could produce materials that existed only in alien imagination. Human computers operated using quantum principles that alien physicists were just beginning to discover. Human energy systems tapped power sources that the galaxy's best scientists considered purely theoretical. The ethereal collective's ancient wisdom suddenly seemed worthless when compared to human achievements. Elder Quinethus reviewed the historical archives again and found records suggesting that humanity had been holding back their true capabilities for millennia. Every previous encounter between humans and galactic civilizations had followed the same pattern of human restraint, followed by revelation and departure. The economic collapse accelerated as alien confidence in their own abilities crumbled. The Vex Consortium's merchant princes realized that human agricultural and manufacturing systems had been producing results that violated basic economic principles. The productivity levels that humans had achieved should have been impossible given the resources they had been allocated. Merchant Prince Vexcalar ordered his economists to analyze human production methods using the new understanding of human capabilities. The results were devastating. Humans had been operating at efficiency levels that exceeded theoretical maximums by orders of magnitude. They had been feeding the galaxy while using less than 1% of their actual productive capacity. The TI. Military implications were equally disturbing. Human defensive installations that had been dismissed as simple early warning systems were revealed to be sophisticated weapons platforms capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The human patrol ships that had quietly protected trade routes possessed firepower that exceeded most alien battleships. Council Security Chief Veltar compiled intelligence reports showing that humanity had maintained complete surveillance of galactic space throughout their supposed integration into alien society. Human listening posts had monitored every alien communication. Human agents had infiltrated every major government and military organization. The supposed junior partners had been the galaxy's primary intelligence service. Ambassador Jake Morrison prepared humanity's official response to the Council's desperate offers. The message would make clear that humanity appreciated the belated recognition of their contributions. But the time for simple negotiation had passed. The galaxy had made its choice when it dismissed human worth. Now humanity would make its own choices about how to proceed. The alien species that had once commanded humanity's services would learn that respect cannot be demanded or purchased. It must be earned through recognition of actual value rather than assumed superiority. The Galactic Council had failed that test completely, and the consequences would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The human fleet prepared for the next phase of Operation Silent Dawn. The aliens had been taught their first lesson about underestimating humanity. The second lesson would determine whether galactic civilization deserved to survive at all. 1 year after humanity's departure, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Galactic Council no longer existed as a unified government. The great civilization that had ruled space for thousands of years had collapsed into regional confederations, each desperately trying to maintain some semblance of the stability that humans had once provided without recognition or reward. Colonel Paul Martinez led the first human diplomatic mission back to galactic space, but the circumstances were completely different from humanity's previous interactions with alien civilizations. The humans returned not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as equals offering carefully considered partnerships to species that had proven themselves worthy of respect. The human flagship entered the Centauri system openly, without stealth technology or hidden capabilities. Every alien sensor in the sector detected the vessel's approach, and the readings they collected defied all known laws of physics. The ship existed simultaneously in normal space and hyperspace, drawing power from sources that alien science could not identify or understand. Dr. Patricia Lee established the first new human research station at the edge of what had once been Council space. The facility was built using technologies that transformed raw stellar material into complex structures within hours. Alien observers watched in fascination as human engineering created habitable environments from empty vacuum and cosmic dust. The research station's purpose was to evaluate which alien species deserved access to human knowledge and assistance. The days of giving away revolutionary innovations for nothing but contempt and dismissal were over forever. Humanity would share its gifts only with civilizations that demonstrated genuine respect for human contributions and capabilities. Captain Ryan Scott commanded the human patrol fleet that established new borders around human space. The vessels under his command welcomed refugees from the galactic conflicts while turning away representatives of species that still viewed humanity as potential servants rather than independent equals. The galaxy's former masters learned that human assistance was no longer available for the asking. The Krillian Empire, once the galaxy's dominant military power, faced complete collapse as their coordination systems continued to fail without human maintenance and improvement. Their mighty fleets were reduced to conducting simple patrol missions within their own territory. The technological advantages that had maintained their supremacy for millennia had been dependent on human innovations that were now permanently lost. Commander Krell submitted his final military report before retiring in disgrace. The Krillian battle doctrine that had conquered half the galaxy was useless without the communication and coordination systems that humans had quietly provided. The Empire's enemies were already testing their borders, sensing weakness in forces that had once seemed invincible. The Vex Consortium's economic empire crumbled as trade networks continued to collapse without human logistical management. Merchant Prince Vexcolor watched 3,000 years of carefully accumulated wealth disappear as supply chains broke down and manufacturing systems reverted to primitive inefficiency. The consortium that had once controlled galactic commerce was reduced to managing local trade within a single star system. The ethereal collective's ancient wisdom proved inadequate for managing the practical problems of civilizational collapse. Elder Quinethus spent his final days reviewing historical archives that documented how previous galactic civilizations had fallen after underestimating humanity's importance. The pattern was clear and apparently inevitable for species that confused technological advancement with actual wisdom. Individual alien species began approaching human diplomatic missions with offers of partnership and mutual respect. The Alterian Republic, a minor power that had always treated human representatives fairly, became the first alien government to establish formal relations with the new human confederacy. Their honest recognition of human capabilities earned them access to technologies that restored their failing infrastructure within months. The hegemony of worlds, which had maintained professional relationships with human scientists throughout the Council era, received human assistance in developing new agricultural systems that could feed their expanding population. The quantum farming techniques that humans shared with them increased food production by 500%, while using less land and fewer resources. Dr. Helen Chang reviewed applications from alien researchers who wanted to work with human scientists on joint projects. The approval process was rigorous and selective. Only individuals who demonstrated genuine respect for human intelligence and creativity were accepted into the collaborative programs. The era of human scientists being treated as assistants to alien researchers was permanently over. The human evaluation committees examined each alien species carefully before deciding whether to offer assistance or establish trade relationships. Civilizations that had consistently dismissed human contributions during the Council era found their requests for help rejected without consideration. Species that had shown respect for human capabilities received generous offers of partnership and technological sharing. Ambassador Jake Morrison delivered humanity's final message to the remnants of the Galactic Council from the command deck of his flagship. The transmission was broadcast throughout what remained of galactic civilization, ensuring that every surviving species would understand humanity's position and intentions. The message was simple and direct. Humanity's departure had never been about abandonment or revenge. It had been about teaching a lesson that could only be learned through direct experience. The galaxy had feared losing humanity's services, but what they had actually lost was their comfortable assumption of superiority over beings they had never bothered to understand. The lesson was expensive but necessary. Civilizations that took essential contributions for granted would eventually lose access to those contributions. Species that dismissed the worth of their partners would find themselves alone when crisis demanded cooperation and innovation. Respect was earned through recognition of actual value, not demanded through political maneuvering or military force. The human fleet prepared to return to the depths of space, leaving behind a galaxy that had been fundamentally changed by their brief reappearance. Some species would learn from the experience and build better relationships with their neighbors. Others would continue making the same mistakes until their civilizations collapsed completely. Captain Danny Rogers monitored communications from across the former Council territory as the human ships departed. The aliens were already beginning to forget the lessons they had learned. Some species were attempting to recreate human technologies through reverse engineering and espionage. Others were developing new forms of arrogance based on their temporary access to human assistance. The cycle would repeat itself in time. Humanity would integrate with galactic civilization again, quietly solving problems and improving systems while being undervalued and dismissed. Eventually, human patience would end again, and another galactic civilization would collapse when humanity withdrew to teach the same lesson to new generations of alien species. Dr. Kevin Brooks sealed the final research files as the human fleet entered hyperspace for the journey to their new home among distant stars. The galaxy they left behind would survive or collapse based on its ability to learn from the experience of losing humanity's quiet competence and innovative problem-solving. The universe was vast enough to contain many civilizations. Humanity would find or create new ones that valued cooperation over domination, wisdom over arrogance, and genuine partnership over exploitation. The Galactic Council had failed the test of worthiness, but somewhere among the infinite stars, other species might prove more deserving of human friendship and assistance. The great ships vanished into the cosmic dark, carrying with them the knowledge and capabilities that had once held galactic civilization together. Behind them, the survivors faced the challenge of building something better from the ruins of their former greatness. Whether they would succeed or fail was no longer humanity's concern.